Hey gang, it's Maria from GoalieTrainingPro.com, and so last week did a post about how Carey Price looks so smooth, and we talked about neutral pelvis, and in that video I showed you how to find neutral pelvis and then how to progress into learning to train with it and learning to move with neutral pelvis. I first did that in a response to a question from Instagoo. I first did that in a response to a question over on the Goalie Training Lab, which is on Facebook. It's the free, private, only for goalies page where you know what? It's really a test. It's like I only want the motivated goalies in there. I make it private, so you have to go to Goalie Training Lab on Facebook and you have to ask to join. If you is too lazy to ask to join, then you're not going to get the I know you don't want the cutting edge stuff and all the detailed stuff, so then I just leave it for you. Hi Greg, how are you? So that's what the Goalie Training Lab is. Anyway, somebody was asking a question about it, and I did a thing about neutral pelvis and how to find it, and then how to use it in your off-ice training, and then even how to think about using it on the ice. So he said, one of the guys from the Goalie Training Lab said, hey, I tried that, I did, and then I even thought about it when I was just working on some movement stuff. And hi Alex. And he said, you know what, I felt like I had more mobility. 100% you will have more mobility or more flexibility in your hips, because just like I said in the video last week, when you are in this anterior pelvic tilt, like your butt's out behind and you think, oh, I've got a big skater's butt, but you don't, you really just have a big lumbar extension. So that's what basically what you're doing is, here's neutral pelvis right there. You're sitting here with your pelvis dumped forward. So then if you can see this is the socket, this is your acetabulum. It's where your femur comes in and it articulates, so the ball of your femur fits into this socket. And so this is when I talk about how everybody doesn't have a ball and socket that are an exact match. Some of you have a ball that isn't made to fit this specific socket and vice versa. So that's why some of you are prone to impingement. There's really not much you can do about that other than try and minimize the impact. But if I'm here and my femur's in there, you know, I can kind of swing forward. But if I'm dumped forward, well then I don't have that much room. Like you can, I don't know if you can see, but yeah, you can see. So here on the front edge, sorry, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, I'm multitasking. But if you're on this front edge, you know, your thigh bone is gonna smash into that front edge, and that's where a lot of you get trouble in your impingement. So when I'm neutral, there's a lot more room in there to swing. When I'm dumped forward, there's a lot less room. Hi, Andre. A lot less room, and then you're gonna feel like you have less range of motion. Plus, you're kind of bumping into that, and over time, that can lead to a callus. You know, a callus on our skin, that's okay. A callus on our bone, that will be increased bone growth, and so we don't like that because it could take. Really, you might have a very nice acetabulum, but because you go anterior pelvic tilt, now you're giving yourself sort of an artificial impingement, and you don't really have to do that. So we talked about neutral pelvis. If you missed it, go to the Goalie Training Lab. It's probably over on Goalie Training Pro Facebook group as well. But then, nowadays, I remember. So then somebody else was like, somebody came on and was like, yeah, you know what, like, my left hamstring's tight all of a sudden, what should I do to stretch it out? And it's like, okay, as soon as you have one side that is tight, not the other side, it's like, it's one of those things that makes you go, and especially if it's all of a sudden. If it's like, you know what, no, I've kind of always had a tight hamstring on that side. Well, still, it's like, well, why? Because really, there isn't a reason you should. Your body doesn't just make one side tighter. Just be like, you know what, I think I'm going to screw with this guy today. I'm going to make his right hamstring feel tight. Doesn't really do that, although it would be quite interesting if it did. And sometimes it probably feels like it does. But, so he's like, what stretches should I do? The answer is really none, because there's a reason that hamstring got tight all of a sudden. My thinking is, and you're going to hear me say this over and over, it's going to sound like a broken record. I'm going to say it for 3 years, and then a goalie coach is going to come out and say it, and everyone's going to be like, oh my God, so-and-so said, blah, blah, blah. But here goes. You heard it here first. I think every single goalie, unless you are a pure stand-up goalie, and probably then still, has their pelvis out of alignment. So you can see here, I don't know if you can see, yeah, you can see in here, like this isn't joined together. Oh yeah, this is even better. See here and here, these are like, they're joints. They're not, it's not one piece of bone, they're joints. And there is some movement in those. So do you see, again, do you see in there? Like this is your sacroiliac joint. So this is your sacrum, this part of the bottom of your spine. This is your sacrum, these are your coccyx. It's your vestigial tail. When we used to have tails, but now that's as long as our tail is. So that's the sacrum. And this is your ilium. These are your iliums is what they're called, but we won't get technical. But so there is movement, and then even here we talked about this last in that Carey Price video about the symphysis pubis. So this is the symphysis pubis, and it has movement too. Even in this model, you can see how I'm moving it. So when we move, like say we're fixed on this side and we, kick that leg out, or when we're in the reverse VH and we're torquing on our pelvis can get twisted and kind of stuck in that position. And it's amazing if you've ever had physio, for a back issue that's maybe coming from your pelvis. When the physio might use a technique called muscle energy, where they put you in a position and then they're like, because you're crooked, they put you in a position and then they're like, don't let me push your legs down or whatever. And it's quite light pressure. It's not pushing as hard as it can, but it's quite light pressure. And they're using the energy from your muscles to put a specific force on your pelvis to kind of pull it back around. And then you get off the table and you're like, oh yeah, like that got it. It feels much better. So your body again doesn't know like, oh, but that's physio. So now it just knows like, yeah, somebody's torquing on my pelvis, and I can either get torqued out of position or properly torqued back into position. Is this making sense so far? Could you guys give me like a heart or a thumbs up or a makes sense comment, just so I know I'm not losing you guys, because I don't want to do that. I'm seeing crickets, which makes me nervous. Oh yeah, okay, I got one person who's at least with me. All right, whoever that was, we're going for it. So, oh, I got more people with me. We're good. Okay, here we go. So, when that pelvis gets torqued out of alignment, think of all the muscles that attach to your pelvis. Now I'm going to go full on geek pal because it's amazing. But you have, well, for starters, your hamstrings attach right up in here. That's where your hamstrings attach. So can you appreciate how, I think how to show this. If your pelvis gets torqued this way, so this ilium gets rotated forward, then this spot on your bum bone, sorry I pointed it around, so this spot on your bum is gonna get moved up, or this spot, all these parts are gonna get moved up like that on one side. The other side is still sitting pretty. So then what you get is these hamstrings, I'm poking at my butt right now, so your hamstrings attach right up in there. Right up in there. So if that gets torqued, now all of a sudden, so let's say this side gets torqued forward. Boom, it goes forward. So that attachment is up higher. So now this hamstring feels really tight. So I'm like, oh, I better stretch it. So then I stretch it to make it longer, but that's really not the problem. The reason it's tight is because you've torqued your pelvis. So what you need to do is get that pelvis corrected so that it's not putting that chronic tension on that hamstring. Cool, eh? And it could even make the other hip flexor feel relatively tight because it sort of makes this long in the back, but this tight in the other side. Yeah, and then like if you think of your hip flexors, like your hip flexor that also crosses your knee, it attaches here. So again, if this side gets tilted forward, it's going to feel looser on this side, relatively tighter on this side. You have your iliopsoas, which attaches to the ilium and attaches to the lumbar vertebra. So again, if that's twisted, it's going to change the tension on that, which then has an impact on your spine. You've got all the muscle, like your erector spinae, your adductors, your groin muscles, you know, so you can see how that's a problem if this pelvis is torqued. And the thing is too, you're probably not going to come off the ice and be like, oh, I feel as though I've torqued my pelvis and I think my right ilium is rotated forward. You know, it's going to feel like, no, I didn't do anything. I feel fine. I don't have an injury. It's just that my hamstring's really tight. So that's why we need to stay on top of it. Like, honestly, I think you guys should probably just see a physio once a month for maintenance, because you can't, it's pretty hard to put this back the way it should be without knowing exactly how it's out, and then the right position to get in to do muscle energy to get it back. So it's like, oh, well, I don't want to go to physio every month, but it's like, that is the kind of thing that prevents some of these, like, more wear and tear on your hip, some of these long-term chronic injuries in your back, your adductors, your hip flexors, all that stuff. So there's where your pelvis gets out of alignment. So, like, yeah, if you feel like all of a sudden, oh, my one hip flexor's tight or my one hamstring's tight, that is immediately what I'd be suspicious of. I am just going to, Shazam's multitasking too. I'm just going to check for questions that popped up as we went. Could you potentially have more abduction with your pelvis tilted though? It depends, but yeah, like when you, like if you do a half kneeling groin stretch, so let me just show you the question. Like, if I do like a half kneeling groin stretch and I'm up here, that's as much abduction as I get. If I'm down here, I can get more, but that's not really functional for us. So yeah, so the answer is kind of like, yeah, but not in a position that you really are going to use on the ice. Okay, let me look here. Greg, left leg is right leg is left leg. One of the legs is shorter. This is the cause. Yeah, like, so you actually have a leg length discrepancy, which is, and again, you want to check, I mean, you're a grown-up, so you probably know that it, as a true leg length discrepancy, not, again, a tilted pelvis can give you an apparent leg length discrepancy that isn't actually the leg length, it's the torque on the pelvis has made one leg effectively longer or shorter. But yeah, if you got one leg shorter than the other. Although if you've had that forever, then really your hamstrings should be used to it, because they're not like, okay, we're both going to grow to be the exact same length because we're the same. It's like the one on the short side will be a little shorter, the one on the long side will be a little longer. Francois, yeah, it's actually a really common problem, but it's not so like when you tear your groin, you're like, oh my god, I tore my groin, and that's like an urgent problem. This isn't really an urgent problem. It's like you're just like, oh wow, that's weird, my hamstring's tight. You don't realize over the long term, man, that is not cool. That's going to continue giving you troubles. Okay, so that's what I have for you today, gang. Thanks for tuning in.